Welcome to Page One, the show for writers with the reader in mind. Here's your host, Zita Christian.
Hi everyone, welcome to Page One. I'm Zita Christian. We're taping this show on a night when the sun is in Sagittarius and the moon is in Libra. What does that mean? And why should I care? Well, our guest tonight is going to explain all that. She is astrologer Janet Booth, longtime friend of mine. Janet, welcome to the show.
Thanks,
I'm
Zita.
so glad you could be here. And Janet's new book, Janet's Planets, or I should say new book, it's the 2011 edition of the book, is out. And we're going to talk about that tonight. It is one of the most useful astrology calendars I've ever seen. I use mine every year, and now that I have mine, I can plan the rest of my year because it is filled with wonderful information. We're going to talk about Janet's Planets tonight, and we're going to talk a little bit about the publishing of Janet's Planets because for Janet Booth, this is her 11th year of publishing. So she's had some experiences that she's going to share with us tonight. But first, Janet, Sun in Sagittarius, Moon in Libra. What does all that mean? Why is that important?
Well, Sagittarius is the sign most associated with publishing,
Yes.
the spreading of the word far and wide, teaching, education, and it's a wonderful sign to be taping our show during. Of course, you do your show every month.
Yes.
And the sun goes through Sagittarius for about a month, starting in the latter part of November into December. And then the moon goes through every single sign throughout the course of a month for about 2.5 days per sign. So when the moon's going through Libra, that's a time when on an emotional basis we have a real desire to connect with people and form bonds and relationships or bounce ideas off of one another or collaborate. So it's very nice for collaborating on a show about publishing.
How perfect. I'd love to say that I planned it exactly
Didn't
that
you?
way. Of course I did. Of course I did. So I want to talk some more about what is in the 2011 edition because as we said at the beginning, this is an astrology calendar. It's a calendar, but it's an astrology calendar. And there's lots of great information in there. Tools for someone who wants to learn some basics about astrology, but also the calendar. So let's talk a little bit about the tools first. You have some information in there about the planets and what kind of activity they represent. Could you kind of go through that for us?
What I say is that I am like the translator.
Okay.
There's influences that are changing all the time as the planets move around through the various signs and line up around the circle of the zodiac in different positions relative to one another. And for the average person, if they haven't studied that, the normal astrological calendar on the market would have little symbols. Like you'd see today, it would say circle over cross, triangle, circle with an arrow. You'd go, huh?
What is that?
Right. And so you and I know that means Venus trine Mars, but to the average person, what they need to know is this is a great time to connect with people for things that you're trying to move forward, or if you need to be diplomatic with people about something that's a very sort of touchy subject or something where there could ordinarily be arguments, it would be a time of harmony. So I'll take my knowledge of that and put it into the daily message, the weekly highlights in English, so that actually, even though it's an astrological calendar, you don't have to know any astrology to use it.
I think that's a key point to bring out. You don't need to know astrology in order to have this calendar be useful. But if you do know astrology, there's a whole nother level of depth there. And if you
Right.
want to learn astrology,
Actually,
there's
yes.
great information in there. In fact, speaking of information, let me just mention now too, so I don't forget, your website has a lot of information.
Wow, yeah.
There's a lot of information on there, and a little. I think you even referred to it in Janet's Planets as a little cheat sheet of the planets and their general activity, and the houses, the area of
Sure,
relationship.
yes.
But for those in the audience who don't know a whole lot about astrology, would you kind of go through those houses and planets and tell us some of the basics?
Well, one of the ways I look at it is to make an analogy with English. So in English you have a subject, a verb, and maybe an adverb or an adjective, things like that. So in astrology, planets are bringing us the action and the energy. We're actually the subjects. So we become like the actors on a stage, and how we interact or play our role is an adverb, and the how is the sign. And the where, like where on the stage or what department of your life things are happening in, is another adverb, and that's the house. Now, for people who've never heard of the term house, it's really just one piece of the pie of the sky. If you cut the sky into 12 pieces, and as we look at a sky map, which is what a horoscope is, these same pieces would always be in the same relative positions. And they represent 12 sort of areas of experience in our lives. So we might say the first house represents the self, the body, the physical health, your genetic makeup, your outlook on life. I call it like the lens that you look at life through. Second house is money matters. You know, I call it house of net worth and house of self-worth. And there's an interesting thing when you study astrology, you start to see some correlations between things, and you go, oh, okay, there's a definite connection between how I feel about myself, what I deserve, and what I have.
Very interesting. Very interesting. So that that part of your life is played out by, you know, or you can see it reflected in activity in the second house.
Yes.
Okay. And the third house?
Near environment, your local neighborhood. Also, it sounds like things that aren't connected. Brothers and sisters, neighbors, school chums, the way the mind works, how we communicate, how we learn. Actually, it would be great for teachers to have an understanding of their students' charts if they either found out, see, you have to know a birth time to get the houses. But there's always a correlation or a affiliation between a planet and a house. So the Mercury function, which remember Mercury is the messenger of the gods, so it has to do with mental capacity and communication. So if even teachers had the Mercury sign of the students, each student, they would find, oh, well, here's little Johnny. He doesn't respond too well to what I'm trying to teach him when he's in a bad mood. He has to be in the right mood. Well, little Johnny probably has a water sign that's very emotional for his Mercury or his third house. And you know what's interesting to me? They've now started to talk about different intelligences.
Yes.
You know, when I grew up and studied philosophy of education, there was like intelligence and that was it. But now they talk about emotional intelligence. And that speaks to the water signs.
And a social intelligence, a creative intelligence. Yeah. Okay. So that's third house, and let's go to fourth house.
Okay, fourth house is your roots, home, family. It's also said to show the beginning and the end of matters. So when we do specialized charts that are examining circumstances in your life, when people ask a question to an astrologer, sometimes they create a chart for the moment that the question is heard by the astrologer. It's called a horary chart. And the answer is supposed to lie in the moment. And sometimes you look to that fourth house for what's the ultimate result or the outcome.
Okay.
But it's a lot about mom, too, and property matters.
And ancestors, roots, sort of your anchor. And
yes, it's the foundation. It's the bottom of the chart.
All right, fifth house.
I call it the fun house.
Yes.
It is our hobbies, our interests, our pleasures, things that are creative output, and it's also children, which are part of our creative output. And
well, isn't that an ultimate creativity?
Right,
Sure.
and where the inner child comes out, which we should always keep that alive.
Yes. Okay. Sixth house.
Health, work. Got to have your health in order to go to work. Sometimes your work ruins your health. See that connection?
Very true.
And it's people in a service position to us, or how we perform service for others.
All right. So we've gone through houses 1 through 6.
And those are all at the bottom half of the chart, below the horizon.
All right. And then when we cross that horizon and come up to house number 7, what are we talking about?
Well, we start to have a reflection of things across from each other. So first house is the house of the self, the seventh is the house of the other, the significant other, the person we sit across from, the one who represents us, the lawyer, the accountant, the astrologer, or our open enemy.
Okay, so there's a whole relationship concept here with the seventh house because it's opposite the first. All right, now the eighth house, and it's opposite the second. So what's that all about?
Second was our money. Eighth house is where our money goes out and mixes and mingles with other people's money. It's joint marital finances, but it's also inheritance, taxes, insurance, investments, mortgages, all of those kind of things.
And
it's also considered a house of transformation. It has also to do with death.
And sex.
Yes, it does have to do with sex.
And
I almost forgot that.
How could you forget?
I know.
Oh. Okay, so let's go up to the 9th house.
Okay, well, we had the 3rd house was thinking and communicating, and the 9th house is communicating at a distance. So when I mentioned we're in Sagittarius now, that is the sign that's affiliated with the 9th house, and the 9th house is the house of travel, higher learning, and broadcasting, as well as everything media related and internet related.
I used to always think of the concept of the 9th house and storytelling, and when I first heard that, because it's a house affiliated with Jupiter and bringing in that concept of law, I thought, well, why would law be part of that? And then I realized our laws are the stories of our society, so of course it fits.
Very good, yes, and the courts are also represented.
So what about the 10th house? That's a biggie.
That's at the top of the chart, and so think
Opposite
about
the 4th.
People who are on top, the boss, the king, the president, the leader, your father. Like if mother was 4th house, father is 10th house. You'll hear some astrologers say the reverse of that, but I don't think so.
Okay.
And what else? Your career, how you present yourself to the outside world, or what your standing is in the outside world, your status, and what your sense of mission and purpose is.
That's a pretty big concept. Yeah. All right, 2 more houses. The 11th house.
Friends, associates, colleagues, the circle that you travel in. Also, it was called the house of hopes and wishes. And I don't read it that way too often. Maybe I should go back to that.
Well, I remember reading a long time ago about, in the times of the Middle Ages, that if you, whatever society you lived in, and there were villages, that you really didn't have a hope or a prayer of accomplishing anything if you did not have the support of the community. And if you committed a crime, you were banished. You were sent out. And that concept of being sent away was called taboo.
Yes.
So if you were taboo, it meant that you were out of the realm of your village and the support of your community, and your hopes and wishes simply could not come true without the support of your community.
Interesting. Yes. Well, there's a nice polarity between the 5th and the 11th house also. They call the 5th house the house of love given, and the 11th house the house of love received. So sometimes you don't get the love of your family or your spouse, but you do from your friends.
Very interesting. I had not heard that. That makes a lot of sense. All right, now the old mysterious 12th house.
That's the least understood and most feared house, because it is the house of our fears. It's the shadow. It's our dream state. It's connection to spirit. It's murky. It's called the house of self-undoing, the house of hidden enemies, but also the house of hidden treasures. So I say, once you find out what your own things are you're doing to undermine yourself, and then you address those or bring them to light, because it's a house about unconscious or subconscious, but when you become conscious, then you can find that those things that are in your 12th house are your hidden treasures.
All right, so if I want to find out about my hidden treasures in my 12th house, I can look at my chart. But if I don't have a chart, you need to get, you need to have a chart cast. So what might one do?
Well, if you do not have your birth time listed on your birth certificate, chances are it is in the file at the Department of Records at City Hall where you're born. The hospitals turn those records over. So you get your birth time, and then there are websites on the internet that you can calculate your chart for free, and it'll show you what signs are going with what houses or what planets are in there. And you mentioned on my website some of the information that's there. That Astrologer's Apprentice cheat sheet is a free download, and that will help give keywords for all the different parts of the chart.
Oh, excellent, excellent. So we looked at just at a quick glance here at those 12 slices of the pie, those areas of life where most experiences, where life, how should I phrase it? The areas of the most common life experiences.
Yes.
That would be good. So now you've got the planets. traveling through those signs. So let's talk a little bit about the energy of the planets.
Right.
And well, in astrology, we refer to them as planets, but not everything is
Right.
a planet. So we're
Right.
including the luminaries.
The lights, yes.
Lights, yeah. So let's go through those.
Oh, okay. Well, this is a short show. We'll have to go very quickly.
Yes.
Yes.
I'll just have to have you back. We'll just
Okay.
make that plan
Well,
right now.
the sun is how you shine in the world. It's your creative impulse and also your sort of conscious self-expression. And the moon is much more about your subconscious reactions to things, your habit patterns. It's feelings and emotions. Mercury, the mind, the communication. Venus, love, money, some of our favorite things with Venus.
Yes.
Mars is more of our assertiveness. It's also about anger. It's about chutzpah and initiative. Jupiter is about expansion, going forth in the world, finding your luck. Saturn is more about learning your responsibilities and obligations and being mature and bucking up and, suffering the consequences if you do bad things.
So Saturn is the brown rice and Jupiter is the Haagen-Dazs.
Yes,
Okay.
that's very good.
Okay.
Uranus I call Cousin Murphy. It's like if it can go wrong, it will at the worst possible time. It's the
okay.
unexpected factor. And Neptune I call Auntie Karma because she is always kind of keeping tabs on your spiritual development. But it's also a planet about what we believe, what we fear. I always say there's two sides of the coin. Fear on one side, faith on the other. So when you have fears, turn it over and see what you need to believe in more.
Like that.
And Pluto is the planet about letting go, getting rid of what doesn't work. Usually we hang on for dear life before we let go or something pulls it away from us. And it's also about sex, like the 8th house, that's its affiliate, and reproduction, money, joint money matters, money and power. Some
big
big things. Plutocrats.
Well, you just referred to Pluto as a planet.
Yes.
I still refer to Pluto as a planet too. I use
Oh,
it as a
yes.
planet. However, not everyone in the astrological community or the astronomical community has
Yes.
demoted Pluto.
Yes.
But I think in the astrological community, we still hold Pluto as a planet. But other things changed in the astronomical community. Talk to us a little bit about the situation now with Ceres and Eris.
Okay. Well, Ceres is between Jupiter and Mars, where there are about 10,000 objects out there called asteroids, and it was the first discovered and the largest. And originally they called it a planet, and then they decided no, they wouldn't call it a planet. And that probably was even before Pluto was discovered. Now, Pluto is usually outside of Neptune's orbit, and it's in a part of the sky called the Kuiper Belt, where there's a lot of things, and they're discovering more and more all the time. Once in a while, it comes inside of Neptune's orbit, so it got labeled as a planet, but it's pretty small. And almost it's a two-planet system with Charon, its little partner. Well, when they discovered Eris in 2005, big hubbub. Was this a planet? Wasn't it a planet? It's out there so far. It has a 560-year orbit, as opposed to Pluto's is like 245 or 49 or something like that. So net, they decided that they would call everything in the Kuiper Belt out past Neptune a Plutoid.
A Plutoid.
Plutoid.
Okay.
But what does that do with Ceres? Ceres
Yeah.
is now still, I think, a dwarf planet.
Yes, I think that's the latest.
So I have an article in the information booth at my Astrology Booth website, and that is called Ceres Promoted, Pluto Demoted, and Eris Noted. Well, now, Ceres is the goddess of harvest and life and fertility. So I said it was like up with life, down with death, and we have to recognize that there's going to be strife, because that's one of the things that Eris is related to.
Janet, there are two things I want to be sure to cover tonight. One is, I want to get your thoughts on 2011. Now,
Okay.
let me say right up front, if you're just joining us, we're talking with Astrologer Janet Booth. And she has a publication comes out every year called Janet's Planets. It is a most useful astrology calendar. You have things in there where you show good days and not so good days for different activities.
Yes.
It's just loaded with information, loaded. But one of the things I love in there is you have this really nice overview of 2011. I was very happy to read the overview that you gave for 2011.
Okay.
So could you talk to us a little about what you're seeing for this coming year?
Well, people have all been excited about what's up with 2012. And I said, wait, before we even get to 2012, we got to get through 2010 and even 2011. And some very heavy things were going on in 2010, as we have noted. And some of them continue a little bit, but one of the major pieces of it starts to lighten up. And actually, you know, it's like there was this big nasty pattern called a T-square, and one piece moved off, so it's not a T, it's just going to leave a square. And that actually is not exact until 2012. Some of these are really slow planets, so they're sort of loosely in that formation for a while, and then they become exact. But 2011, it's going to be a little better than 2010. And there are points at which it might be quite nice. The summer looks, parts of it, kind of nice. By the end of the year, looking quite good. Starts off with actually go mode. Nothing of the planets appear to be going backwards, what's called retrograde. And that's pretty rare to have like 3 weeks with nothing going backwards. So after that new moon eclipse on 4th of January, get your plans in action. It's go time.
Nice. Nice. All right, well, that's very encouraging. I want to have you back on another show, and we'll talk about all the 2012 talk that's out there.
That's another whole topic.
Yes. But I want to be sure we talk a little bit about the publishing of Janet's planets. I mean, this is wonderful information for people who want to know about the astrological calendar, and you can plan your days, good days, bad days. But for those out there who are saying, I have subject matter that I would like to publish something as well. You've had, what, 11 years of publishing?
Self-publishing, yes.
So what have you learned? And I love this new format. So what's different here?
Well, I started off, it was more like a wall calendar. So you'd have it was, the pages were oriented differently, and it would hang on the wall. And of course I was going to a printer. I used a fellow in Bristol, and I would order up, however many I thought I would need, but it was always, well, better get extra, and it costs less per issue if you get more printed, and then I'd end up every year with a bunch of boxes in the hall that I'd go, oh crap, there's like $600 sitting there, or $1,000 sitting there, and that wasn't making me happy. So I decided I wanted to change to print on demand, and it did mean that I had to pay my graphic designer extra to spend more time to redesign how all the pages were laid out because the orientation changed.
Sure.
But I was able to go with a company that's one of the biggest print on demand firms in the country, and what's nice about that is I can order up a bunch of inventory, but I don't have to order mega bunches. I don't end up with big things at the end of the year, or summer comes and 3 people want calendars. I can just order one sent to each of them. If I'm selling to stores all over the country, I can just have ship 12 to Oregon, ship 20 to San Diego, ship 10 to Albuquerque, and I'm not standing there at line at the post office. That part's nice.
Oh, I bet that's very helpful. Speaking of such things, I do want to mention too that Janet's Planets is available on Amazon, on in any of the chains, a lot of stores in the community.
I don't think it's in all the chains.
It's not?
No.
Oh, okay. Well, it should
this is something that will interest your writers too if they're self-publishing. Because mine is a time-sensitive publication, I worried that if Barnes & Noble, everyone across the country, ordered 6 and sent back 5, I'd have to pay the print-on-demand firm to print all of those. Then there's shipping that goes. I would end up broke. I would be like owing $50,000 or something. So I said they're on a non-returnable basis. So the chains have not ordered them.
They won't order because they can't return.
They could special order them for anybody that wants them.
But people can go to your website, or they can go to Amazon, and
that's where I wish they'd buy
now,
it.
That's interesting for that whole concept of self-publishing, because I have had a couple guests on the show who have self-published, and one woman in particular, I won't mention her name, but I felt so bad for her. She came to this country not speaking English well and not understanding the full concept, and she was so taken advantage of. And she had a beautiful story of her experience. So there's so much to be learned in self-publishing. But from your experience, and well, certainly 11 years of experience, you would definitely favor the print-on-demand.
I was lucky because a friend of mine had been through the self-publishing route himself, and he knew about the lead time it took to get into the catalogs for the big book distributors and all those kinds of things. So he gave me a heads up. He says, you really need to finish writing it by such and such a date, so this happens, so that happens. So, and actually, I'd missed those dates. I'm hoping for next year.
Well, and so you learn. So even with 11 years of experience, you're in a new area and you're learning.
Oh, yes.
So this is good, word to the wise out there. A lot of research to do before you enter a self-publishing.
I mean, something my designer and I didn't realize is we thought it would print on the inside of the covers. And so we submitted things to go there. And when we got the proof back, there was nothing there. It's only, this company only does the outside cover and white inside. So then we had to go back and redo it and change how it was going to be. Yeah, we had to change some things.
Of course. Now, I noticed also in Janet's Planets, you have some input, the ephemeris, which, gives the precise time and placement of the planets that came from Starcrafts up in Epping, New Hampshire. So you can pull resources from other places.
Yes, well, I
work
asked
with
permission.
People. Well, of course, yes, absolutely.
So it says reprinted with permission.
Yes.
And,
okay, so you've had a good experience with all of this. I think this is wonderful, and I'm for a couple reasons that we're having this conversation. One, because of the publishing experience.
Yes.
There are a lot of people out. I'm sure that you've had the conversations and the unfortunate experiences of some where they've got had to rent a storage bin to put all of the books, and
or
not,
you just
not knowing.
at the end of the year throwing them in the dumpster breaks your heart.
And that's awful. So in the 2 minutes that we have left, Janet, I want to go back. It's just gone by way so fast. But in the 2 minutes we have left, I want you to tell me a little bit about let's see. The whole concept of best days and worst days for certain activities, because that's one of the key things about your calendar that I love.
It's different. I don't think any other astrological calendar has something like that, and that's the part I labor over the hardest, and it's the most torturous. Some days are better than others, like that beer commercial says.
Yes.
And so what I'm doing is I'm looking for days that have an emphasis of a planet that is associated with particular activities. So there'll be a section that says, health. And it doesn't mean for everybody's health it's the absolute best day, but for health matters, here's these days, these months that are better than others. Or the worst lists are always longer than the bests, but it's good to know those too, because you want to avoid those as much as you want to try to aim at a best. But I think one thing your writers would like to know is that each day I rate from 1 to 5. 1's the worst, 5's the best. And there's also listings when there's these little blackout periods of a few minutes or hours every few days when the moon is in a dead zone. And if you're going to send out your publication to an agent or to a publisher or something like that, you want to send it. You want to send it on a high-rated day, not during a dead zone period, and you'll have better luck. Well, there's a few 5s, but maybe you get a 4.
Sure. Well, Janet, thank you very, very much.
Oh, you're
and
welcome.
I'm going to I'm going to circle all my 5 days and really maximize the energy.
Yes.
Thanks very much for being on the show tonight and sharing all of this. And let me just say to you in the viewing audience, I will close with the words of Ursula Le Guin, who said, "There have been civilizations that did not use the wheel, but there have been no civilizations that did not tell stories. So find your story and find a way to tell it. And do join us again next time. Thank you."
Food for the crew and guests was provided by Manchester Grill of Manchester, Connecticut, and Angelo's Restaurant of Glastonbury, Connecticut. Be sure to send your writing questions and your comments on the book club selection to Zita at page 1, P.O. Box 1515, Manchester, Connecticut, 06045-1515, or send an email to Zita at page1tv.com.